Good evening, everyone. Welcome once again to Bhagavad-gita Satsang. I'm Hari-kirtana. And as always, it's a great pleasure for me to be here with you, an honor to have you here with me. And if you can hear me, those of you who are joining me real time, would you please press the raise your hand button just to let me know. Thank you very much. Glenn, it's nice to see you. Javier, when you raise your hands, your names bounce all over the place. Annie, nice to see you. Christina, I got your email. Thank you very much. And Carla, nice to see you here. I trust you know that I will not see you on Sunday. Okay, thank you very much. And wow, we got a whole bunch of folks that just barreled into the room all at once here. So thank you all very much for being here. Let's get to our usual housekeeping chores. So for those of you who are new to the satsang, you can adjust your audio settings and your viewing options in the upper right-hand corner. No need to worry about your microphone or video camera. I cannot see or hear you. But if you would like to be heard, then you can type something into the chat window. You can also use the Q&A box if you prefer, but if you use the chat, then we get to share your questions and comments with everyone else. Our last class, last week, continuing with chapter 18, the Yoga of Perfect Renunciation, we finished up Arjuna's license to kill and then spoke about knowledge, the knowable and the knower, knowledge according to material qualities, the qualities of material nature, and action according to material qualities. We covered verses 18 through 25. This evening, we will delve into the psychology of action and the psychology of knowledge. So still moving through this subject matter of action, the actor, and understanding, and the different ways of understanding, including understanding morons with high IQs. Sometimes we wonder, how can people who are so smart be so dumb? In this portion of the Gita, Krishna will give a detailed account of the psychology of people and how they act and the kinds of knowledge that compels or impels them to action according to the three qualities of material nature. And we'll talk a little bit about why these three qualities of material nature give us such a wonderful, excellent lens for understanding the world of our experience. Before we cover these topics, we will chant our usual invocation mantra. So for those of you who are new to transliterated Sanskrit, the diacritical marks around the letters above or below them are pronunciation cues. The dot over an M indicates we close our lips together as we normally would do with an M, but at the same time, we also close the back of our tongue up against the back of the roof of our mouths. A bar across a vowel indicates an open and elongated version of that vowel as opposed to the vowel without the bar, indicating a shorter and truncated version of that same vowel. So I will chant this mantra, and if you like, you can chant it back. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Translation: I offer my respects to the Supreme Person, the Son of Vasudeva, Krishna, who is the all-pervading transcendence. So before we get going, I just want to note that This is our 100th class. We've been doing this now for just a little over 2 years to get to this point. And this class coincides with a rather extraordinary day, certainly that will live in the memories of anybody who works in the financial industry. It's a time when I've been thinking, along with others here in America, that we've reached a tipping point with the coronavirus pandemic. And that has been occupying a lot of media attention and a lot of everyone's attention on social media as well as the news media. And I thought that I could not really proceed with the class as if that wasn't happening. In the same way that I came to the more concrete realization that I cannot proceed with my life as if it is not happening. I feel very fortunate to have the life that I've got insofar as I've just had a lot of good fortune. Even when my fortune wasn't so good, it was still pretty good relative to so much of the misfortune that we find in the world. And, you know, as this was building up, I was thinking, how can I get on with my life without this affecting me? And, you know, that's just not possible. It's already affecting me. It's already affecting people around me. And therefore, indirectly, it's already affecting me. And I expect that one way or another, this will have a direct effect on whatever it was I thought my plans were. Yoga is something that comes in really handy when things don't go according to plan. In fact, yoga philosophy tells us that you may think that things are going according to plan, but they're not going to continue to go according to plan forever, even if they're going according to your plan right now. The adjustment to disruption, or that is to say, the ability to remain steady, equipoised, when the going gets rough, is a test of where one is at in one's yoga practice. And we'll cover some verses this evening that speak to this. I have to admit that as I went through the material for this evening's class, I wasn't really sure where the connections were going to show up between our current state of affairs, or for those of you who are watching this well after the fact, the historical state of affairs. But we'll see. It just so happens that these verses have particularly self-evident meanings. And one evidence of this is that in this portion of the Gita, we don't find too much in the way of commentary from the traditional commentators in the various lineages where the acharyas, or the teachers, the founders of the lineage, offered commentaries, or their commentaries are very short, just a kind of a reiteration for the most part of what the verse says. So we'll go through our verses as we usually do, and we'll just see where we can make a connection between current events and what Krishna is telling Arjuna, and how we can practically apply this knowledge as we face what is bound to be a major disruption to whatever we thought our plans were. that will ripple out in a wide variety of directions. So let's see. We'll go and take a look at our verses from last week first. We finished up with verses 23 through 25. Disciplined action that is performed without attachment, free from attraction or repulsion, and without any desire for the fruits of action, is said to be in the mode of goodness. Last week when I covered this verse and these 3 verses that we're going to review, I used a translation from one of the editions of the Bhagavad-gita that I refer to. This time, I am offering you my own translation. So this first description of action is action that is in the mode of goodness, or that is endowed with the quality of goodness. Remembering, of course, there are 3 qualities of material nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. So we will go through action as it is understood through the lens of each of these. So here, the attributes of action that are in the mode of goodness are performed without attachment, free from attraction and repulsion, and without any desire to enjoy the fruits of those actions. A pretty high bar for the mode of goodness based on what I think most of us normally experience in our relationship to action. So. Verse 24, but action performed with great effort by one whose ego is invested in the pursuit of selfish desires is called action in the mode of passion. This, I think, is a good description for most of us. We strive to accomplish things, and our identity is tied up. Our sense of self-esteem is tied up in whether or not we can succeed. And these desires are generally born of our own mental concoction, a conception of who we are and what will make us happy. Remember, in the Vedic system, there are 3 categories of knowledge: knowledge of relationships, knowledge of practices, knowledge of the ultimate goal. So if we think the ultimate goal is the fulfillment of our personal desires, and the practice is to work really, really, really hard to make our dreams come true, and our sense of relationship is based on whether or not we succeed or fail. My relationship with the world is I'm a success, or with myself. I feel myself to be a success, or I feel myself to be a failure, or I feel something in between. This is called action in the mode of passion. And the mode of passion, Krishna has already described, is something that is great for people who really, really want to be stressed out all the time and experience a lot of anxiety, and who want to ultimately become frustrated and angry. Because even when you get what you want, you can't keep it. So not recommended. And then finally, verse 25, action performed under the influence of illusion, without regard for binding consequences, loss, harm to others, or personal limits, is said to be in the mode of ignorance. So usually when we think about what we're going to do and how we're going to do it, if we apply a little bit of intelligence or discernment, we're going to take a few things into consideration. One, what are the consequences? in Western society, since we don't really have a good, solid understanding of the law of action and reaction, or karma, most people simply don't know that the consequences of their actions will be binding. That is to say, they will be obliged to experience a reaction to that action. And because there's not a lot of knowledge about how this law of nature works, people don't connect any harm they cause to other beings to harm that's going to come back to them as a reaction. What goes around comes around. Everybody knows that. But somehow or other, it just doesn't click for most people when they're actually acting in the world. So without regard for binding consequences, on the assumption that you even know that there are binding consequences and what they might be, but someone under the influence of illusion does not know this. Without regard to what will be lost, who will be harmed, and how will they be harmed. Your own personal limits. In other words, someone acting under the influence of illusion, they'll act in such a way that doesn't take into consideration whether or not they're actually able to do it or not. Now, sometimes that can be a good thing. I'm not qualified to teach the Bhagavad-gita in a lot of ways, certainly not compared to my own teachers. And if they were present, I would never dare consider for a minute that I should teach anybody anything, because they're actually the ones who should be teaching. Still, I don't let the fact that I'm not qualified to do something stop me from doing it. And I think that that's actually a good strategy if you want to get something done, because if you wait till you're ready, you'll never do it because you're never really ready. At the same time, I try to be aware of my personal limits, which is to say, before I teach this class, I listen to my teacher's classes. I do a lot of reading. I have like a dozen Bhagavad-gitas out on my desk that I'm looking at. So someone who is acting on the basis of the, or action that is done by someone who is under the influence of the mode of ignorance, which at least for the purpose of teaching Bhagavad-gita, I hope I'm avoiding to some degree, there's no consideration of whether or not I can do it. There's some cable channel. All right, so that's the end of our verses. And so I'll stop share. So I have a weakness for episodes of the original Star Trek television series. It's my only weakness. And, you know, as with most TV, now I don't have cable, but I do have this antenna set up that allows me to get broadcast channels so that I can watch football and Star Trek, which is my only weakness. And I discovered, because every so often Star Trek goes to commercial. And I discovered that a few stations down, there's this station that is like a real DIY kind of oddball station. And during the same time slot, they run videos like of epic fails, like just home video. Somebody on their little digital device, their iPhone, did a video of somebody on a little bicycle trying to do a wheelie off a ramp and just like totally messing it up, or like somebody on a skateboard trying to do some fancy thing and landing on their nose. Or, I mean, basically it's just epic fails of attempts to do things by people who clearly did not know they could not do that. And I found that I had to start ignoring that channel after I discovered it, because it's really addictive to watch people in the mode of ignorance doing things, trying to do things they can't do, and risking injury to do it anyway, so I've stopped doing this. My only weakness, Star Trek. Any questions about anything that I have spoken about so far with verses that we just reviewed from last time about action in the 3 different qualities of material nature? Please go ahead and pop any comments or questions that you have in the chat window. And meanwhile, while I await your questions or comments, I will once again share the screen as we move into this week's verses. So we're going to cover verses 26 through 32, and as is our usual practice, I'm going to read through each of the verses, then come back and speak about each of them in detail. And then I've got a homework assignment for you. That's something that doesn't usually happen. So we begin with verse number 26 of the 18th chapter. Krishna continues, "One who is liberated from material attachments, free from the propensity for self-promotion, fully endowed with determination and enthusiasm, and unwavering in success or failure, is said to be an actor in the mode of goodness." Text 27. "One who is intensely attached to acquiring the fruits of work, driven by the desire to enjoy those fruits, who is greedy, predisposed to aggression, impure, and vacillates between joy and sorrow, is said to be an actor in the mode of passion." Text 28. "One who is unhinged, vulgar, obstinate, deceitful, and adept at insulting others, who is lazy, morose, and prone to procrastination, is said to be an actor in the mode of ignorance." Text 29. "Hear now, O winner of wealth, as I comprehensively describe the different kinds of discernment and determination according to the 3 qualities of material nature. O son of Krita, discernment by which one can distinguish between constructive engagement and disengagement, what should be done and what should not be done, what is to be feared and what is not to be feared, what is binding and what is liberating, is discernment in the mode of goodness. O son of Grita, discernment by which one cannot correctly distinguish between principles of religion and principles of irreligion, between action that should be taken and action that should not be taken, is discernment in the mode of passion. Text 32. Son of Prita, discernment by which one considers irreligious principles to be religious principles, and religious principles to be irreligious principles, that is covered by darkness, and sees things as the opposite of what they really are, is discernment in the mode of ignorance. All right, now we'll go back to verse 26. So what's happened here is that Krishna has gone from describing action itself in the different qualities of material nature, now to the actor. So the actor, the action itself, the location of action, the instruments of action, and the supreme person, the Paramatma within the heart. Remember, these are the 5 factors of action that Krishna has identified. I didn't get them in the same order that Krishna identified them in. I believe he says that it is the location, or the material body, the person within the body, the instruments of action, or the senses, the action itself, and the supreme person, the Paramatma within the heart of all beings. These are the 5 factors of action. So So now Krishna is describing some of these different factors and how they are different according to the qualities of material nature that influence them. Of course, the Supreme Person, Paramatma, is beyond the influence of these three qualities of material nature. So the Supreme Person is not a factor here, or is not considered in this list of factors of action based on the qualities of material nature. So coming back to verse 26, one who is liberated from material attachments. Oh, almost forgot. This is a verse we're going to chant. So once again, I will go through the diacritics, the indicators for pronunciation. There are very few in this verse. A dot over an N means you're going to, instead of bringing your tongue behind your teeth, you're going to bring your tongue, the back of your tongue up against the back of the roof of your mouth. So it's like a dot over an M, but without your lips coming together. The sound comes out of your jaw and your nose. An apostrophe means that a vowel was dropped out of the front of a word, and the vowel at the end of the word that precedes it will just join with the next word. So this is a rule of euphonic combination that will get us into the right meter. The bars across the vowels, I have already explained. A dot under an R means you're going to curl your tongue up into the center back portion of the roof of your mouth. So instead of with your top teeth over your bottom lip, you will make the sound with your tongue up into the center of the roof of your mouth. A Y at the end of a word is a y sound that moves directly into the vowel of the next word as opposed to being an E sound. A dot under an H at the end of a word at the end of a line indicates that the vowel that precedes the H will be echoed back. A short version of that vowel will be echoed back. You pronounce every letter that you see, so double Ds, you actually hit the first D, slam on the brakes, and then proceed with the second D. Same thing with Ts. They don't merge into a D sound like American English. We use two T's in the word letter, and somehow it becomes letter as opposed to letter. A C is always a CH sound. So if you want an S sound, you get an S. If you want a K sound, you get a K. A C is always a CH sound. Once again, your tongue is going to curl back up into the center of the roof of your mouth when you make that sound. And with that, I will chant one line at a time. And if you like, you can chant each line back. Here we go. Mukta sango naham vadi dhrityutsaha samanvitaha siddhya siddhyorni vikara. I'll chant that line again. Siddhya siddhyo nirvikaraha. Karta satvika uchyate. You may have noticed that this evening I'm blessed with a studio audience who's also chanting with you. All right. Translation: one who is liberated from material attachments, free from the propensity for self-promotion, fully endowed with determination and enthusiasm, and unwavering in success or failure, is said to be an actor in the mode of goodness. So let's go back for a moment to the Sanskrit. Mukta sango or mukta sangaha, when it's a phrase that stands by itself, means liberated from material association. So mukta, liberation. Sangha or sangha, like sangha is to associate, to be together, a group, to be connected. As in a sangha, a group of people, or satsang, a group of people who are interested in sat, or the truth. So that's where the word sangha merges with sat, or eternality, the truth, becomes satsang, which is basically what we're doing right now. So mukta sangha, someone who's liberated from the association with matter, or with the influence of material nature. The mode of goodness is a material mode that it has inherently more freedom to it than the modes of passion and ignorance. So therefore, it is a platform for complete liberation, but even unto itself, it is a level of being in the material world that allows for the maximum application of one's free will, because one is not obliged to act according to one's conditioning to the same degree. Then, if you look at the third line, siddhi, perfection, as in mystic cities, mystic perfections, powers. Success is another way of understanding siddhi. And then asiddhyo means imperfection or failure. So in this case, we're talking about if your actions are perfect, or if they're not perfect, if they're success or if they're failure. Either way, you are undisturbed. That is to say, when things are great, you are not elated about it because you're just not all that attached. And if everything goes wrong, totally not according to your plan, you are still equipoised due to having attained this authentic level of detachment. So this is not to say that we engage in some kind of spiritual bypassing and artificially say, I'm not attached. It's okay. Everything just went wrong. All my plans just went completely haywire due to things over which I have absolutely no control whatsoever. It's cool. I'm all right. I'm fine. Well, you know, sometimes our plans don't go according to plan, and, you know, we're not fine about it. Finding that place of constructive, authentic distance and engaging in practices that allow us or support us or empower us in some way to deal with success or failure from an even-minded position. Acquiring knowledge where we see things as they are and gain a proper understanding of our position in the world as not being the controllers of everything, and being able to cultivate a sense of surrender to the circumstances and acceptance of the circumstances over which we have no control, is a process. It's not instant. You can't fake it. It's a process. And what Krishna is offering us here is not something we should artificially imitate, but rather a state of being we can aspire to through the practices that Krishna is recommending in order to get us to this state of being known as the mode of goodness. So if you have any questions or comments about this verse, go ahead and pop them into the chat or the Q&A. And I will take questions from my studio audience once we get to the end of the chapter, when the general call for questions comes up. Our next verse, verse 27. One who is intensely attached to acquiring the fruits of work, driven by the desire to enjoy those fruits, who is greedy, predisposed to aggression, impure, and vacillates between joy and sorrow, is said to be an actor in the mode of passion. So here, Krishna is speaking about someone pretty much who I described earlier, but now adding the attribute of vacillating between joy and sorrow. So in other words, everything's going great, I'm ecstatic. Everything's going rotten, I'm totally bummed. And this kind of bouncing between extreme happiness and extreme sorrow is a symptom of the mode of passion. And this is a wonderful self-analytical tool. You can use it to understand other people, but it's also something you can turn on yourself just to see and understand, okay, if I'm the kind of person who gets really elated when everything goes right and really, really morose when everything goes wrong, well, that's an extreme effect of the mode of passion. And if you know what it is, you know what to do about it. If you don't really have a handle, any clue as to like what's happening to me, then you don't know what to do about it. This lens of the three qualities of material nature and understanding the psychology of yoga at least gives us a frame of reference for understanding. And if we have theoretical understanding, then we can do something about it. And then we can apply a practice based on that understanding rather than being just mystified as to what's going on. A person who, well, we'll hear in a verse coming up about the confusion that is inherent in the influence of the mode of passion. Meanwhile, I have a comment from Glenna. This verse, 26, clearly applies to our current situation over which we have no control. Yeah, it really does. And this is why in the Vedic system of Varnashram, the Brahmins are supposed to be leading the society, because the Brahmins, the spiritually enlightened intellectuals who are characterized by the mode of goodness, they're the ones who are most capable to provide guidance and leadership in times like the ones we are experiencing right now, because they don't have skin in the game of material desires. They're kind of above that. And at the same time, they are prone to compassion. So their concern will be not what's in it for them, but how can others be benefited? How can the suffering of others be alleviated? What is the best course of action to benefit everyone else without any consideration for selfish desires? And now we can ask ourselves, all right, well, who amongst our leaders exhibits those kind of qualities? Well, politicians are supposed to be kshatriyas, which in earlier verses in the Bhagavad-gita have been described as chivalrous, brave, generous, trustworthy. The word of a kshatriya is sacred. And they are influenced by the mode of passion and goodness. And the kshatriyas are supposed to take their guidance from the Brahmins. I have seen our national leaders lately, and I don't see them looking for the advice of these spiritually enlightened intellectuals. Carla's comment or question: how do we know when we are being guided by the universe versus when we are just being indecisive? Where do we turn for clarity? Well, the universe, I think it's good to remember that the universe is a person. The universe, as a not person, can't give us any guidance. To give guidance implies the attribute of being a person. You know, we say the universe loves us, or we ask the universe to cooperate with us. So we just sort of unconsciously project the attributes of a person on the universe. Krishna is directing us not out to the material universe, but into the supreme person within the heart of all beings. And it is that person who is a factor of action who ultimately signs off on whatever it is we want to do, fulfilling all of our desires, but who desires himself to act as the guide for the living being who has somehow or other become entangled in the complexities of material nature. So where we turn for clarity is inward toward Ishvara, Paramatma, the supreme person who is ready, willing, and able to offer guidance for us. And how do we know when we're being guided by the supreme person? When the guidance that we hear, either from within our heart or when someone tells us something from externally that resonates with us as the kind of advice that we have been waiting to hear, because that's how the Paramatma works sometimes. When we see that it is clearly for our spiritual benefit, that's one way to know. Whereas if it's just something that reinforces our identification with our material desires, probably not so much. I hope that is a satisfactory answer to your question. And if you have any other questions, please go ahead and pop those in. I'm going to continue. You're welcome. With verse 28, the last description of an actor: one who is unhinged, vulgar, obstinate, deceitful, and adept at insulting others, who is lazy, morose, and prone to procrastination, is said to be an actor in the mode of ignorance. Does this sound familiar to anyone? You probably have seen these qualities in at least one person besides yourself. I know for myself, this sounds like me as a teenager. And in fact, when I think back about what kind of teenager I was, yeah, I had a lot of this. Fortunately, I don't have to deal with teenagers in my life. This is one of the ways that I feel fortunate. And I'm not a teenager anymore. And I don't want to be a teenager again. Therefore, I feel impetus to engage in activities that will liberate me from the entanglement with material nature. I mean, really, how many of you want to go to high school again? Do you really want to do that? I don't want to do that. From Sue, maybe this is too much for a quick answer here. Is unconditional love another name for the Supreme Being? Well, unconditional love is an attribute of the Supreme Being. And there are names of the Supreme Being that indicate love or the beloved, one or the other, because love is a two-way street. So for love to have meaning, you have to have three things: a lover, the beloved, and love itself. Love just by itself has no meaning. There has to be a lover and a beloved in order for the experience of love to be there, in order for the name, the word love to have meaning. So the answer is yes and no, because there are many names, dozens, hundreds, millions, unlimited names of the Supreme Person. And many of those names are indicative of the attribute of unconditional love. But to say that love itself is the Supreme Person, I think would be incomplete. I think that the attribute of unconditional love applies to the Supreme Person. So let me know if that answers your question. And meanwhile, in the interest of time, let's go ahead, and now that we have heard about actors, the factor of action being the person who is acting, and their different characteristics according to the three qualities of material nature, let's finish up with our last few verses. Now, Krishna continues, "Hear now, O winner of wealth, as I comprehensively describe the different kinds of discernment and determination according to the three qualities of material nature." So this evening, we're going to cover discernment, and then determination will show up in the verses we're going to cover next week. So verse 30, "O son of Pritha," and for some reason, Krishna begins each one of these three verses with this matronymic. That is to say, Partha means the son of Pritha, which is another name for Arjuna's mother, who is also Krishna's aunt. So Arjuna and Krishna are cousins. O son of Pritha, discernment by which one can distinguish between constructive engagement and disengagement. What should be done and what should not be done. What is to be feared and what is not to be feared. What is binding and what is liberating is discernment in the mode of goodness. So these first two phrases, constructive engagement and disengagement, what should be done and what should not be done, are almost kind of synonymous. In other words, one who knows the difference between that kind of engagement, which is constructive or useful, or something that should be done as a matter of duty or because it is a prescribed activity, and what one should disengage from, what should not be done, because it is not prescribed, or it is the opposite, something that is unprescribed. What is the antonym of prescribed? So these words here right up top are pretty similar. What is to be feared and what is not to be feared. This is a particularly useful consideration for our current situation, because right now people are pretty fearful and they're afraid of getting sick. They're afraid of maybe losing their job, losing their source of income, having their whole life just be totally discombobulated. And that's a legitimate fear. Ultimately, all fears roll back to fear of death. And that's a legitimate fear for one who is invested in material life, for one who understands things as they are. One is not bewildered by the change of bodies that we call death. This rolls all the way back to the second chapter, when Krishna begins his teachings by explaining the difference between spirit and matter, or the conscious living being and the unconscious material body that appears to be conscious due to its having the attribute of animation by virtue of the presence of the soul or the Atma within the body. One who is firmly fixed in the realization that they are not their material body does not fear death. And one who is not so fixed in this realization, who thinks what happens to this body happens to me, has every reason to fear death, or at least every apparent reason. What is binding and what is liberating? In other words, what action causes one to be obliged to experience a reaction, and what action does not only does not oblige one to experience a reaction, but burns up reactions that are on the way, and creates impressions on the mind that frees one from the sense of identity with matter. So this is discernment in the mode of goodness. In the next verse, not surprisingly, the mode of passion shows up again. O son of Prita, discernment by which one cannot correctly distinguish between principles of religion and principles of irreligion, between action that should be taken and action that should not be taken, is discernment in the mode passion. So in other words, when you're confused, when you can't tell the difference, you might want to know, but you actually can't figure it out for whatever reason. Here, Krishna is explaining that the intellect, the buddhi, the power of discernment of those situated in the mode of passion simply can't tell the difference between righteousness and unrighteousness, or which path of action should be taken. What's appropriate action or inappropriate action according to time, place, and circumstance? What is going to be liberating and what is going to be entangling? So this is a state of confusion, or the inability to make a good choice. The mode of passion distorts our intelligence. And just like if you look at yourself in a carnival mirror, it's all, your image is all distorted. So you really can't tell, you know, what's right and what's not. You don't get a good picture of reality, and therefore your decision making is impaired accordingly. And that brings us to our last verse for this evening, and we are going to chant this verse as well. One additional piece of information here about the transliterated Sanskrit. An accent mark over an S is an SH sound, but not an SH sound from right behind your teeth, shh, but rather an SH sound from further back in your throat. So you're going to curl your tongue back towards the top of the back of your mouth, and the sound is going to come more out of your jaw than from right behind your teeth. Dot under an H at the end of a word that's not at the end of the line just means you're going to do a short stop on that vowel, and that covers everything. The TH is not th as in the or hatha. There's no such thing as hatha yoga. It's hatha yoga, so you pronounce each letter. Here we go. Adharmam dharmam ittiya. Manyate tamasa vrita. Sarvatan viparitamsha. Buddhi sa parthatamasi. Translation, O son of Prita, discernment by which one considers irreligious principles to be religious principles and religious principles to be irreligious principles, that is covered by darkness, and sees things as the opposite of what they really are, is discernment in the mode of ignorance. So this is another opportunity for me to resist the temptation to get political or speak about certain news networks that you may have heard of, but I doubt you watch. Adharmam means against the principles of religion. A negating prefix, dharma, sometimes just translated as religion. We have been speaking about dharma in the context of principles of religion. Whereas the person who is influenced by the mode of passion is confused, and sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. Someone under the influence of the mode of ignorance is always wrong, every single time. They accept that which is as that which isn't, and that which isn't as that which is. They are always moving in the wrong direction, in the opposite direction of the way of reality, basically. So there's a very nice commentary by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada for this verse, and it explains it so well, I'm just going to read it to you. This is from his edition of Bhagavad-gita as it is. Intelligence in the mode of ignorance is always working the opposite of the way it should. It accepts religions which are not actually religions and rejects actual religion. Men in ignorance understand a great soul to be a common man and accept a common man as a great soul. They think truth to be untruth and accept untruth as truth. In all activities, they simply take the wrong path. Therefore, their intelligence is in the mode of ignorance. Now, notice this phrase, intelligence in the mode of ignorance. It doesn't mean you're stupid. It means that your intelligence is so influenced by the mode of ignorance that you become very proficient at being wrong. Hence, you can understand morons with high IQs. The world is full of high IQ morons. That came from Saul Bellow. I can't take credit for that. But now you understand why they exist and how they exist, because these are really smart people who are under the influence of the quality of ignorance. And there just seems to be so many of them because it's Kali Yuga, the iron age of quarrel and hypocrisy, when people whose intelligence is covered by the modes of passion and ignorance predominate, which is why you see so much of this kind of confusion and stupidity, or I should say ignorance, in the world. All right, so last call for questions. While I'm waiting for your questions, here's your homework assignment. In the last several verses, and in the verses that follow, if you want to jump ahead, Krishna will once again work through the different attributes of the psychology of action, the psychology of knowledge, the psychology of the actors, etc. So your assignment, if you would like to take it up, is to take all the verses that speak about the mode of goodness and put them together so that you have a complete description of all of these different factors of action in the mode of goodness. Then take all of the verses that speak of these things in the mode of passion, put those together. And so you have a complete collection of attributes of factors of action in the mode of passion, and then do the same thing for ignorance. And then you'll have a nice, complete, very comprehensive set. That's another way of looking at the information that Krishna is delivering here. And then go out into the world and look for these qualities of material nature in the people, places, and news events that you see in the world. And then take the camera and turn it around and look into yourself and see if you can use your these tools for your own kind of svadhyaya, self-study, study of the nature of yourself as you are influenced by these qualities of material nature, and see how you can apply your yoga practices to moving yourself in the direction of the mode of goodness in the various aspects of your life. All right, so now is the official call for questions. We're running a little over on time, but I'm going to take questions anyway. Whoops, that was tonight's class, the yoga of perfect renunciation. We covered the psychology of action, the psychology of knowledge, and how to understand morons with high IQs. Verses 26 through 32. So, any questions from the studio audience?
Yeah, actually, it's pertinent to what you were just speaking to. I was wondering, is there a danger in getting too caught up with trying to understand when you're practicing svadhyaya, the self-study of like maybe where you're acting from ignorance or passion or goodness in your life as the actor from a place of intelligence that Krishna was talking about, as opposed to kind of...
Hold on, I'm going to repeat the question for all of you out there in internet land. So hang on.
Sorry.
That's all right. Go ahead. So
as opposed to putting into practice what Krishna is recommending us to do in order to come to a place of acting out of goodness. My question is there a danger in getting too caught up in the act of self-reflection in regard to goodness, passion, and ignorance versus taking shelter of Krishna's recommendations?
All right, so the question is, I'm going to have, because I got to echo this back. So the question is there a danger in reflection, taking the time and effort to reflect on how we are influenced by these qualities of material nature from, say, an introspective position, if we get preoccupied with that. In other words, can we get preoccupied with the self-analysis part to the detriment of practice? That is to say, simply acting according to Krishna's instructions. Well, I think that Krishna is giving this instruction for us to utilize in self-analysis. Remember, Krishna, at the beginning of the Bhagavad-gita, is speaking to Arjuna like Kshatriya to Kshatriya. You know, at first Arjuna says, I can't do this. And Krishna says, come on, what are you talking about? Get up and fight. Everyone's going to think you're a coward. Don't be like that. And Arjuna says, no, I don't know what to do. You need to tell me what to do. And then things change. Krishna takes the position of guru, basically. So here, Krishna is summarizing his teachings, and he's helping Arjuna to see how he can engage in an activity that appears to be in the mode of passion from the platform of the mode of goodness. And he's encouraging Arjuna to work from that place. So there has to be a certain amount of introspection that leads to proper understanding before you can engage in the process. Now, if one is influenced by the mode of goodness and you kind of get caught up in intellectual pursuits, then it becomes, you know, armchair philosophy, and your self-analysis becomes kind of like, you know, the professor who would rather go to a lecture about heaven than actually go to heaven, you know? So you don't want to spin your wheels in self-analysis, but you do want to do enough self-analysis so you can understand where you're at, where you want to go, and then apply yourself to the practices in an appropriate manner for where you're at. You have to meet yourself where you are as much as you have to meet others where they are if you are in the role of a teacher. So if Krishna is going to be your teacher, then you have to know about where you're at so you can present yourself to Krishna in an honest way in order to receive instruction and know when you're hearing the voice of Paramatma and getting guidance on how to get to where you want to be from wherever you happen to be right now. Does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, I hope that is satisfactory for everyone out there in internet land. And we are a little bit over our prescribed time. So I thank you all very, very much for being here and for taking a little extra time beyond our usual allotment. And let me let you know what we're going to do next time. If you have any questions after the fact, please send them to me at hari-kirtana.com. I'm always very, very happy to hear from you. Next week, the psychology of determination, the psychology of happiness, and we'll speak about nectar, poison, and madness. Wow. Far out, man. All right. That's all, folks. Thank you very much once again, and I look forward to hearing from you with any questions or comments you have, and seeing you next time. I hope you have all good fortune until then. Yes, live long and prosper.